is the Dynasty Vipers Vipercast. Hello and welcome back to another edition of the Dynasty Vipers Vipercast, presented by G.I. Joe. I don't know. I got the shirt on today. Got a little bit of the Cobra Commander action going on here. We're not sponsored, so if you're looking for a way to throw away money, send it our way. We'll be more than happy to take it right now. With that all being said, what we will not take are busts in our fantasy football lineups. And this week, we're telling you which players you do not want to draft ahead of your fantasy football drafts. Joining me, as always, the one and only, our resident running back, Major Caldwell IV. How you doing, Major?
I am good. Let's get it. I love this type of talk.
And, of course, we have the queen of extreme fantasy football here, the PPR Viper herself, the one and only Tara Roberts. How you doing, Tara?
I'm doing fantastic. How did you already know what I was going to talk about?
You know what? I figured once I see the show sheet and some of the names that may have ended up on the show sheet, I figured the PPR Viper may be ready to strike today. But before you get your opportunity to strike, we're going to let Major kick us off and give us his first player that he does not want to draft this season, which I know is probably going to raise some hairs here along the way. But Major, who's that one player, preferably at the quarterback position, that you are avoiding at all costs?
I'm avoiding Daniel Jones. I really don't have that many reasons. I just don't like him because you guys call him Vanilla Vic. It makes me not want to like him. And even though he has my guy over there now, Paris Campbell, like I really want him to be successful. I want Paris Campbell to win. I just don't like Daniel Jones because of you guys. And, he's just not that good. He runs a little bit. He falls on his face. He fumbles the ball. He's not a good football player, but everyone's trying to make him this like messiah of the league for some reason. I don't get it. I mean, again, I really don't have that many stats. I really don't like him because of you guys. So thank you for that. Especially Sarah and with the Vanilla Vic nickname. That's not what I'm not leaning into that. So I don't know. He has some weapons, but they're all kind of like injury prone. If you look at that roster, they have a tight end who can't really stay healthy. They have all these young receivers who can't really stay healthy. They have a running back who can't really stay healthy. So, like, I'm not that high on Daniel Jones as everyone else is. So, I mean, I don't know. You guys can have it from there.
Well, no, Major, I see where you're going with this because the one thing that the Giants did a really good job, and Brian Dable coming into the system last season, was protect Daniel Jones from himself. Prior seasons there, he's had a problem turning the ball over. That was rectified last season. Brian Dable's offense coming in here, it was pretty simple. It was pretty smart. Give the ball to Saquon Barkley every chance you got. Hand the ball off to him, let him run it. Dump it off short passes, let him make things happen. That and the fact that the Giants didn't really have playmakers on the outside, injuries to the wide receiver, it really opened this offense up for those short dink and duck, high efficiency type passes. Now, with Saquon Barkley, I'm sure Saquon's going to end up there in New York here at some point this season. I'm sure they're going to figure out that whole contract situation sooner rather than later. But in the event that isn't, if you take Saquon Barkley out of that backfield, I think that's going to put a lot of stress on Daniel Jones, where he's going to try and push the ball down the field, try and be that guy to beat teams. I'm not sure he's that guy. I don't think he's that quarterback. There's only a handful of quarterbacks that have that ability. That's a top 5 in the league. That's your Patrick Mahomes, who can do it without as much of a supporting cast. Trevor Lawrence is creeping up into that conversation, right? Josh Allen. These are guys who can do it by themselves from the quarterback position. Daniel Jones needs a little bit of help, and that's where Saquon Barkley kind of factors into that equation. He's the guy who helps Daniel Jones, protects Daniel Jones from himself. So I can understand why you could feel that he's going to be a bust this season. But last year he did have a very good season. I think he was QB 10, give or take, somewhere there. I'm kind of comparing him to Jared Goff. Jared Goff also had a pretty good season. If Jared Goff could play all 17 games at home, he'd be QB 1.
Go ahead, Tara, because it's your dude. I want to hear your defense of this.
Yeah, I mean, I will. And it's funny because Matt was like, she's fact checking, but Daniel Jones is my boy to the point where I didn't have to fact check that because I was like, that can't be right. He actually had one of the best touchdown to interception ratios in the entire league. So that was not it. So yeah, the touchdowns and interceptions were very off in that. I don't know I don't know what sleeper version you're using, but it needs to be upgraded.
See,
He
hold on.
was, in fact, a top 10 quarterback. So yeah, I mean, I understand if people want to go all in on Daniel Jones, but I mean, he's a fine low end QB1. So I am not, especially for where you're drafting him and his ADP. His ADP is perfectly reasonable. So yeah, I am pro Daniel Jones.
Sleeper
Well,
doesn't
fun
lie.
fact about Daniel Jones, he only had 15 passing touchdowns last season. He had 5 interceptions, so a 3-to-1 ratio there. But
What is
again,
it?
it was his
Oh,
rushing
I'm probably
upside.
looking at the projections. That's what they're projecting. Okay.
Now, when you take those 15 passing touchdowns and you add the 7 rushing touchdowns to
Yeah.
it kind of changes that number a little bit from 15 to 5 to, I don't know, 22 and 5. So it looks a lot better that way for Daniel Jones, which is what kind of catapulted him there to that position. But again, I think Daniel Jones' fantasy value is directly tied into Saquon Barkley being on the field and being that presence that teams have to focus on. And obviously that's going to alleviate a lot of pressure there that we're going to see with Daniel Jones. Now, Tara, over to you here. You want to talk about another quarterback, and you're going to still pick on that NFC East here. So who's that quarterback that you say you do not want to draft?
I will be saying it while my son, apparently, he refuses to go to sleep, tries to plug in chargers that I don't need. But he's being helpful. My quarterback, it's definitely not Daniel Jones because he is not being overvalued and overdrafted. But unfortunately, it's Dak for me. And it is no offense to Dak. This is not a Dak hate train. I'm not like on the major side of this is the guy that I just can't stand. I like Dak. Cool guy, very steady, very stable quarterback. Someone who is a fine QB2. I would love to have him as a QB2 in Dynasty. But the thing with him is that, unfortunately, I just don't feel like he is more than that QB2. Because if you're looking around him, drafting him as your QB1, wildly, wildly unnecessary. And when we're looking at all of the quarterbacks, I believe that we're going to have a resurgence of low-end QB1s that are offering strong upside. And Dak is currently being drafted behind guys like Justin Herbert, Trevor Lawrence, Deshaun Watson, and ahead of guys like Tua Tagovailoa, Daniel Jones, Anthony Richardson. And those are all guys that I would prefer to have over Dak Prescott just because they offer a lot more upside and possibilities with him. They either got high passing volume or the rushing upside of Daniel Jones and Anthony Richardson. And when we're looking at Dak, he just doesn't really have that wow factor about him. The ranking is fine, but I don't think that he's necessarily someone that I want to draft because I don't think there's a need to it. When you're looking at him, there's a very real possibility that he finishes in the QB 13 to 16 range in average points per game. So for where you're drafting him, there's not a lot of upside. There's no realistic possibility of him being able to crack the top 5 like any of these other guys actually do have that kind of shot. So if I'm looking on my draft board, I'm really not trying to look at Dak. I want to do, unless he drops, and realistically he's not going to because someone's going to take that bite and say, I'm comfortable with him as my QB1. I would rather take the guy ahead of him or wait and draft somebody like Geno or Aaron Rodgers who are going to offer me the same level of upside, maybe a little bit more.
Daniel Jones over Dak.
Yeah.
I don't think it's too far off. I think when we're looking at where the consensus has these players right now, I think we're seeing Daniel Jones and Dak Prescott both in that QB 11 to QB 13 range. And they're both in that within a spot of each other, back and forth. Both of them borderline on QB1 territory right now as far as heading into your drafts right now. It comes down to what kind of upside you want to play with. You want Daniel Jones's rushing upside, which is something that Dak Prescott doesn't necessarily possess, or we have not been able to see it yet. Or do you want to trust maybe the better weapons as far as receivers are concerned, which is where that comes into Dak? I think if you get either one of these quarterbacks as your QB2, you're probably feeling pretty good. In super flex leagues and whatnot, I don't think I would trust either one of them to be my QB1. I do have trust issues for a reason, and this is why. Fantasy football has given me trust issues in just about every category, and the quarterback position is no different. If you don't have one of those top 10 quarterbacks that we view as top 10, I mean, we know Daniel Jones was a top 10 as far as fantasy is concerned, but he's still not considered a top 10 quarterback, no matter how you want to look at it. He's going to drop in drafts. So I know why Major's on that whole thing where he's kind of a bust because of the whole Saquon Barkley situation. And I know why Tara believes Dak Prescott's a bust because look at the numbers last year. Look at the interceptions to games played ratio. I mean, Dak Prescott was turning the ball over left, right, and center. they need to find a way to take the ball out of Dak Prescott's hands, very similar to how the Giants took the ball out of Daniel Jones' hands. Get Tony Pollard involved in the run game. Get Tony Pollard involved in the short passing game. Those high impact type passes there, and then you kind of move down the field and kind of open things up. So right now, again, I don't trust either one of these running quarterbacks, but there's another quarterback I don't trust, and that is Baker Mayfield. And I'm not calling Baker Mayfield a bust because we know what he is, but unfortunately, his inability, his incompetence factors into Mike Evans. Now, Mike Evans, this one hurts. It really does. But I don't think that Baker Mayfield is capable of supporting two 1,000-yard receivers. Again, it's not impossible. I mean, Odell Beckham Jr., Jarvis Landry accomplished his feat way back in 2019. But right now, I don't see it happening. It's very unlikely. Now, the ADP for Mike Evans isn't terrible. He's wide receiver 1, so that bust potential's already been built into his value heading into 2023. But when you're talking about guys being drafted after Mike Evans, would you rather Brandon Ayuk or Mike Evans? I think I'm going with Ayuk. Would you rather have a guy like Deontay Johnson or Treylon Burks, or would you rather have Mike Evans? Oh, I feel better with Johnson and Burks. When it comes down to the high upside of Burks, Deontay Johnson is going to get those PPR targets. So I feel much more comfortable with their safer floors. Now, I hope that offensive coordinator there, Dave Canales, can get Baker Mayfield on that Geno Smith program there so that Mike Evans can hit 1,000 yards for the 10th straight season to start his career, which would extend his NFL record. And yes, Mike Evans is a Hall of Famer, no matter how you want to look at it. From weeks 4 through 17, Evans, though, he was held touchdownless, and that was with Tom Brady throwing the ball. So what do you think is going to happen with Baker Mayfield throwing the ball? Baker Mayfield is one of the most erratic passers that we've seen in the last 10 years since he's come into the league. Essentially, he's been erratic. He's been hot and cold. He had a couple good seasons to start off his career. After that, it has been bad. Even when he came in for the Los Angeles Rams last season, he had some good times. He had some good moments. They all came against my Raiders, but he had some good moments. That being said, I can't trust Baker Mayfield. I can't see him supporting both Chris Godwin and Mike Evans. Something has to give. Mike Evans plays predominantly on the outside. Chris Godwin plays on the inside, which gives Godwin the more favorable matchups. And obviously, I don't think Baker Mayfield has that arm, at least the accuracy. He's more concerned about hitting the ball boy or the stick guy on the sidelines than he is his own wide receivers. That's how inaccurate Baker Mayfield has been. And I know Mike Evans is good, but he's not that good. It's not like he's got a 49-inch vertical or anything crazy like that where he's going to jump out of the gym like DK Metcalf does. Evans is good, but he's not Baker Mayfield proof. And that's my problem heading into 2023. I think people think that, hey, there's value. We've seen this bust. It's already built into his ADP. Wide receiver 31, I can get as my wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4. As long as people aren't playing the name game with him, I can get him a little bit later. But I think you're just going to set yourself up for disappointment. So for me, that's why Mike Evans comes in on my bust list. And it has nothing to do with him as a person. I think he's a great player. I just don't like the situation. So when I talk about players that are going to bust, more often than not, it's because of the situation that they're heading into, whether it's offensive coordinators, injuries, whatnot, or other players coming in. Now, Major, the next player you're talking about here, he's getting a little up there in age, but this one could definitely strike a chord on some of us in this room. Not me, by the way. Who do you got?
I got the PPR king, your boy Austin Eckler. I mean, I tried this last season and he made me look crazy. I'm gonna try it again. It's like one of those things like with when will Brady fall off? I think Eckler's starting to fall into that category of like, when will he fall off? He's hitting that 28-year-old range, and we all know in running backs that's like when you fall off the cliff. A lot of touches last year, 326 touches last year for one player. And again, like I said last year, he runs reckless. He runs into people. He's running over people. I give him a little credit. Last year, I did see him make a few people miss. He had a little more wiggle in his game than he did in the past, but he's a hard runner, and like that's why I do like him, because he runs so hard. But it's gonna be a time where he has to fall off, right? I don't know. But and another thing, I think the team is kind of leaning more towards Herbert. I think they're trying to make him the man there. I think they're trying to make him an MVP type caliber quarterback. They got him more weapons. They went out and drafted Quentin Johnson. They have the Keenan Allen, who's always underrated. Mike Williams, who gives you big games every now and then. I I don't know. And I really like people kind of fell off of Spiller, but I like Isaiah Spiller. He's only 21 years old. Like last year, he was 20. He's a baby. He's like a kid. He doesn't even know what to do yet. And I think sitting behind Austin Eckler a year and seeing how a constant professional, working out, doing all the stuff that he does, I think Isaiah's going to be nipping at him a little bit this year. Yeah, but to me, with him, it's like the age thing. And I don't think. Oh, all quarterbacks. The point I want to mention: most quarterbacks, pretty much all quarterbacks, they have like an ego, and they do not want to be known as the dink and dunk. Brady went through that like for the first part of his career. Everyone's talking about him being a dink and dunk quarterback, and he got Randy Moss and he threw the ball down the field like almost every play. Every quarterback wants to throw the ball down the field, and I think with the added weapons at receiver, I think Herbert's going to really try to show people that he's not just relying on Austin Eckler in that dink and dunk game to become that man. So I think they're going to move away from him a little bit. And plus, he may have kind of, I don't know, pissed off the organization a little bit with like his semi holdout. I don't even know if that was really considered a holdout, but he was very public about him being unhappy with his pay there. And most organizations don't like when people come out and talk like that. So we'll see how it goes. But I'm gonna go with Austin Eckler on my overrated list until he is overrated.
I mean, if you keep saying something enough times here, eventually it's going to happen. Eventually, we kept
I'm
saying
going to be right.
Tom Brady. We said Tom Brady was going to fall off the cliff eventually. Eventually, it happened. It happened last season. But I get it. Hey, you know what? I'm in your corner when it comes to Austin Eckler. I'll say it and I'll say it again. It's going to pick a bone with Tara because Austin Eckler is not a running back. He's a slot back who lines up behind the quarterback. That's what Austin Eckler is. He's a 28-year-old slot back who lines up behind the quarterback coming off 326 touches. You take that even further last season. Major, I'm surprised you didn't read the notes here and kind of use this. You take out those two games against the Browns and the Rams, and you look at those other 16 contests, 655 rushing yards. 3.4 yards per carry. And we're not even talking about everything else that goes in. If everyone, you got to remember, Austin Eckler, he was healthy for the most part last season. Keenan Allen wasn't. Mike Williams wasn't. So there's more opportunities in those injuries. Mike Williams should be healthy. We're banking on him being healthy. I would never count on Mike Williams to be healthy. Keenan Allen, I'm hoping he stays healthy this season. And then you've got Quentin Johnson coming in there. So now you've got three big-time receivers there that are going to command targets. And what is Austin Eckler going to get? He gets targets. He doesn't get the carries because he can't run the ball. 3.4 yards per carry. He's not a running back. I'm sorry. What he can do, he can catch the ball better than any back in the game. Let's call it the way it is. He is the best pass-catching guy who lines up behind a quarterback in the NFL. Tara, your rebuttal.
My rebuttal is that I just want everybody to go back through the shows about a year prior, same time period, and just look for these guys saying the exact same thing and look for me giving all of the logical arguments, and then we will all meet at the end of the year for the exact same results. So that is my rebuttal. But I will say this because I don't want to drag on the show like super long. I admire Major's commitment to Isaiah Spiller. Again, he just keeps on. It just keeps on.
Hey, wow.
All I'm saying is I admire it, and I sincerely hope that he beats out Joshua Kelly and can get that backup role.
I like Kelly too, though. I like Kelly, but Isaiah, he's a special guy. I like his game, but we'll see.
I hope he's special enough to get that backup role. I really do. I'm rooting for him.
Major's giving Spiller that whole Ramondre Stevenson type deal here. He's like, yeah, you know what? I'm going to keep saying I'm going to concede, but then when it happens, I'm like, hey, I told you guys 3 years down the road.
No,
well, Ramondre
I was 100%. I was sure about him. So. Spiller, I'm still kind of like, he's just so young, and I think people just kind of threw him out like with the baby with the bathwater, like they say. But he's I don't know, man. To be 20 years old and be in the NFL, that has to be difficult. So like, I think it takes some adjustments, so he'll be all right.
Well, Tara, give us another reason why maybe 0 RBs, maybe the approach that we want to take, because I'm looking through our bust list, our players that we do not want to draft, and even if you look around the rest of the league and through your fantasy drafts, running backs seem to be the most volatile, I guess, position there when it comes to fantasy, because we've seen a history of running backs fall off from year to year. They may be a RB1, RB2, RB3 one year, and then they drop back to RB15, 16, 17. Now, it's the nature of the position, injuries. This is why the NFL probably has that devaluation of the position, but you got another running back that you want to talk about.
Oh, I hate that devalue of the position topic because I am on the running back side on that one. Power to you, Saquon Barkley. Aside from that, unfortunately, I do have to talk negatively about a running back, as you mentioned, and it's Joe Mixon. It is Joe Mixon who is being overvalued, and we're just gonna ignore the obvious that the man is a legitimate cut candidate. Let's put that to the side because that's obviously a reason that he's being overvalued, but it is beyond that. We're just going to talk about that in the context of if he stays with the Bengals and takes the pay cut as he should, because he does not want to enter this market. Trust me. I have a video on it, but let's talk about it. He's been overdrafted, even if he stays with the Bengals. Mixon saw a total of 270 touches in 2022. And there were 5 running backs that saw in that same range within 270 to 280. Aaron Jones, Jamal Williams, Miles Sanders, Ramondre Stevenson, Alvin Kamara. A lot of variety of names, a lot of variety of workloads. Mixon had the worst efficiency of all of those backs. Was not even close. He had the lowest yards per attempt at 3.9, which is kind of crazy considering that he would be lower in yards per attempt from a guy like Jamal Williams, who was so aggressively utilized in short yardage situations. But he was still lower in yards per attempt than Jamal Williams was. He had the lowest rush yards per game out of that entire group. Even lower than Alvin Kamara, who by all accounts had a horrific season, even lower than that. It's extremely concerning because the majority of those running backs outside of Alvin Kamara, they were all in committees. So we haven't even seen the depths of how bad this can go with Joe Mixon. And he is the only one on that list to have this massive outlier game. In week 9 versus Carolina, Mixon had 22 carries, over 150 yards, 5 total touchdowns, good amount of receptions as well. And if you exclude that game, the entire season was absolutely bleak for him. He would have had a total of 3 rushing touchdowns over the course of 14 games. That is absolutely insane for somebody who was a 3-down back. It should not have been like that. The efficiency was absolutely awful. We talked bad about Leonard Fournette and how he performed in that Tampa Bay offense. At least Leonard Fournette had an excuse of the offensive line being horrible. Nobody could get anything done in that offense. Cincinnati's offense was good. There was no excuse for Joe Mixon to be that inefficient. And even just the eye test, he just looked bad. He looked like he lost a step. So if another back in this offense, fingers crossed for Chase Brown, all those Chase Brown Dynasty shares that I hope y'all went out and grabbed, if anyone shows any upside, Mixon is going to see reduced touches. And he doesn't have any room for that to happen because he's got very poor efficiency. And he will not hit his ADP. It will not even be close. This is a guy who is an extremely risky pick. Even if he remains with the Bengals, I wouldn't touch him with a 10-foot pole. And if he comes out there and he's averaging 3-ish yards per carry again, his role will be reduced. There's only so long that can go. And we know that the leash is extremely short. If anybody else shows any kind of pop in that offense, his role is going to be reduced. So it's Joe Mixon for me. It's one that I just cannot get with under any circumstance.
Oh man, that hurts to hear. I'm a big Joe Mixon fan, and just the off the field stuff. It's just hard for me to even say anything bad about Joe because he's his running style is one of my favorites in the league. He's so smooth and agile, and he runs hard. But something just not clicking there anymore, and maybe it's the age. I don't know. It's just I'm with you though.
Well, prior to that game against the Carolina Panthers, that Week 9 contest, he was only averaging 3.3 yards per game. And if I'm going to give it to Austin Eckler for averaging just 3.4, you better believe I'm going to give it to Joe Mixon as well. There's a reason why people in Cincinnati were calling for Samaje Perine. There's a reason why people were already talking in the offseason about Travion Williams, and now Chase Brown is now a favorite of people here right now as far as sleepers or breakout candidates. I don't think that Joe Mixon is going to see the volume in the passing game that he had last season. Not only was he 6th in red zone touches with 46, which is something I don't think is going to happen again because I think Joe Burrow's going to want to throw the ball a little bit more to Jamar Chase, to T. Higgins. So I don't think Joe Mixon's going to get those red zone opportunities. But he also finished with the 6th most receiving yards amongst backs, hauling in a career high 60 of 75 targets for 441 yards. You want to know where Joe Mixon's fantasy production came from last season? It came in the passing game, and it came in that Carolina Panthers game. We're not going to see a 5-touchdown game again this season from Joe Mixon. And we probably aren't going to see the same volume in the passing game from Joe Mixon. So, yeah, I'm with you, Tara. That's why when I did the whole Cincinnati Bengals Team Spotlight series show right here on the Vipers Network, you can go back and check it out. He became one of my top busts, not only for the Bengals, but for fantasy altogether. Now, I'm going to stick with the running back position here with mine. And you talk about why Joe Mixon should take that pay cut, how he doesn't want to test those mean streets of free agency right now. Ask Leonard Fournette. Ask Ezekiel Elliott. Ask Kareem Hunt, who's being patient. And AKA being patient means no one's offering you squat right now. I'm going to look at this closely, and my bust is going to be, and I went off on a tangent last week, and I'm going to go on a tangent again this week. It's Dalvin Cook. Dalvin Cook had shoulder surgery here in the offseason. He's saying all the right things. He said he needed the surgery to stabilize the shoulder so it wouldn't be a liability in the future. Now, I know everyone here has had job interviews before. Don't even try and tell me that you haven't mistold the truth during a job interview. That's exactly what Dalvin Cook's doing right now. He's not entirely telling the truth. So he's not lying, but he's not entirely telling the truth about the severity of his shoulder issues. Now, right now, when we look at this, I'm no doctor, but even after surgery, it's going to be a risk. There's no guarantee that he ends up in a better role than he had in Minnesota last season. We talked about the teams that he could end up in. Denver's on the radar right now. We're hearing the New York Jets come out here recently. Neither one of those situations is good for Dalvin Cook. Javonte Williams is there. Breece Hall's there. No matter where Dalvin Cook goes, it's not going to be a better situation than what he had in Minnesota. And then further to that, we look at this. Cook, he's coming off the board in fantasy drafts ahead of J.K. Dobbins, ahead of Aaron Jones, ahead of Joe Mixon, ahead of Cam Akers, ahead of Miles Sanders. What do these guys all have in common? They're all actually on a team right now. Dalvin Cook isn't even on a team. How can we have him as a value right now? If you don't have a team, you cannot score fantasy points. It's really simple. Unless you're in one of those weird leagues that gives you points for sitting your ass on the couch, right? That's those Latavius Murray type leagues right there. Now, there is a very good reason that Minnesota released Cook, not only on the financial end of things. His carries, 15.5 per game, was the fewest since 2018. His 2.3 catches per game were a career low, and Minnesota actually increased the amount of times in which they passed last season. So Minnesota's increasing their pass, and Dalvin Cook's even getting fewer catches per game. That should tell you something right there. Now, Cook, he was solid in 2022, RB8, but it was all about the volume. 78% opportunity share. That was fourth amongst backs. If you need some other form of a metric here to show you everything I'm trying to speak about, rushing yards over expectation, in which he was second in 2020. Then he dropped to 36th here in 2022. His elusive rate has gone from 8th in 2020 to 34 to 28 here in 2022. So you can see the efficiency drop in Dalvin Cook. There's a reason why, outside of the finances, that Minnesota felt like they could let him go. There's a reason why, probably because he wants $10 million, reason why no team has picked him up. You don't want to go on that market right now. And we've talked about the value of the running back, how NFL teams see that. I don't see a place outside of maybe Miami. And even in Miami, if he goes to Miami, I'm not sure I'm dropping Devin Achane. I'm not sure I'm dropping Raheem Mostert. I'm not sure I'm dropping Jeffrey Wilson because of the history of injuries. That's going to be a red flag no matter what. The efficiency dip that we've seen over the last few seasons, that's going to be a red flag. So I look at this, and I can't justify RB16 out of Dalvin Cook ahead of all those other running backs. All those other running backs who I feel are higher, with maybe the exception of Joe Mixon. I think Mixon's probably in that same category as Dalvin Cook. But I'd rather have all those other running backs. Actually, I'd rather have Joe Mixon because I actually know he's on the Bengals right now. He hasn't been cut yet like Dalvin Cook was.
Yeah. After saying all of that, man, he's going to end up on your Raiders just because you said that.
You know what? That wouldn't surprise me. That's like Carson Wentz ending up with the Raiders too at some point.
Right.
You know it's going to happen. I mean, it's you don't want it to happen so bad. But Raiders fans, the funny thing about us is we know how to handle disappointment. We're almost, when it comes to the 7 stages of grief, we're already on number 7. Before it even happens, we're already on number 7. We've already come to an understanding that this is what the expectation is as a Raiders fan. So really, we can avoid steps 1 through 6 every single time and just accept number 7 as it happens. Now, another running back that we have to accept being a potential bust, Major, is
Isaiah Pacheco, everyone's so high on this kid. I like him. I mean, I don't like his running style. I've been saying that since the draft. I hate to say this too because I don't like putting this on players, but he runs like he's going to get hurt. The guy runs straight into walls every single time. Don't think I've ever seen him run out of bounds. They don't use him in a passing game. And it kind of felt like, even though he was a hot hand most of the time, it felt like the way they do the running back situation in Kansas City is almost like a running back by committee. Whoever has a hot hand, they're the one that gets the ball. It just so happened that he was the one that was hot most of the time. But I kind of like some of the running backs they have there, like Jared McKinnon. I think he still has some gas left. And no one talks about Clyde Edwards-Helaire like he's just invisible man now. I mean, he did it to himself, but we have to give him the respect. He was a first round draft pick as a running back. So, and then they went out and drafted this kid that everybody is talking about, and that's was a Deneric Prince. This dude is like, I'm hearing all
Bigger,
kinds of
stronger,
like,
faster, whatever you want to talk about. The dude is a freak show.
And I think he's more elusive. The guy's just, he seemed like he has the total bag. So we'll see how that works out. I think Isaiah, again, he runs really hard. And shout out to the Chiefs offensive line because again, Pacheco to me just kind of ran straight to big open holes and ran hard. So I think they can like plug and play anybody to kind of do that. And I think they may be looking for someone who can do just a little bit more than that out of the backfield. And this is crazy to me that Kansas City, team who passes almost every play, they don't throw to the running backs. It's kind of a weird situation to have there. But I don't know. It seems like, they're going to throw the ball most of the time. So they're going to devalue the running back position already. But then it's almost like you're in a committee. So I don't know. I think Pacheco, he showed well, but I don't know if that's going to be his backfield. I don't know if he's that RB1 in that offense, like a solid RB1.
Well, just ask Jerick McKinnon. The Chiefs will throw the ball, except it's within the 5-yard line and in just to pad those Patrick Mahomes stats each and every time. Which, hey, we're not complaining as people that manage Jerick McKinnon in their lineups. But the thing with Pacheco is he is going to be limited based on the pass catching ability. It's going to go to Jerick McKinnon. That's how that's going to play out each and every time. And that's just Andy Reid's typical type offense. He always likes to have that pass catching running back, whether it's a Brian Westbrook or whether it's going to be Jerick McKinnon. Isaiah Pacheco, he's going to be the guy doing the heavy lifting. He had a good end of his season, but I think Major, I think you're pretty much right. I think he's just another guy. I think if he's your third running back, maybe your fourth running back, I think you can justify having him in your lineup. But if you're the kind of going that zero RB approach and you're banking on him being that RB1, I just don't think that value is going to be there for you, Tara.
This one's tough for me. I like Pacheco, and I do think he has RB1 upside. But again, it really does hinge on him earning that trust within the receiving game. We did see in the AFC Championship where he had 5 receptions on 6 targets for 59 yards. There's some promise, there's some potential. It could happen, but it's not a lock right now. And he's got things that he has to work on to gain that. His work on the ground was impeccable. Once he actually became the starter, his yardage was right up there, right below guys like Derrick Henry, Nick Chubb, Josh Jacobs. So
he was just under 5 yards a carry. He was doing good. Yeah.
I think he was RB6 there the back half of the season there from a certain week on. As far as rushing yards were concerned, maybe not touchdowns, but the rushing yardage was there.
Rushing yards. Yeah. I mean, it's highly impressive. So the talent is there. The potential is there. If he can just earn, you don't even have to, I'm not asking for you to get the Jerick McKinnon level of receptions, just earn a little bit of trust to where they can just dump off to you a few times a game. And then from that point, he can, he's got the power and the burst and the speed to, make something of it, get some yardage, but he has to earn that trust. And, that's something that's not a guarantee. So it's risky, but I don't think he's being overdrafted. I think the ADP is fine for right now. It's just, the upside is not as much of a lock as it is with the guys that have the receiving upside.
Well, speaking of teams that you wish would trust a little bit more, there's a team down in Duval County, Tara, that you wish would trust their running back just a little bit more in the passing game.
Please.
Yeah.
I waited everybody for you. Come on.
So this is just like painful. Obviously, I love Duval because they're like all, Clemson and whatnot. And so I just, said, I hate speaking about Isaiah Pacheco this way. And I hate this one too with Travis Etienne. But if I'm saying it, then it must be true. I am highly uncomfortable
What?
with his ADP, unfortunately. And let me explain why this is a massive issue. Obviously, as these guys just speak like literally every episode, I'm, an aggressive Austin Eckler supporter. We talked about how I fought tooth and nail against these guys right here. They're right here, these two right here. That Isaiah Spiller was going to take goal line carries away. I said, it's not going to happen. They swore up and down it did. I said, no. I was right. I wasn't that way with Josh Jacobs, but I wasn't on that side of, a bunch of people thinking, oh, Zamir White, he's going to come in, he's going to be, committee and hurt the workload of Austin Eckler. So I lean towards, I support these veterans, these guys holding on to their workload, and, that these rookies aren't always going to come in and steal carries for them. So if I, of all people, am saying that Tank Bigsby is a problem, it's a problem. So I've tried to rationalize it and justify ETN, but I just can't find a single reason. And it goes even further than Bixby. That's not even the issue, because prior to the draft, even if I go back and look at my best ball teams, I have 0 shares of Travis Etienne, and it just doesn't make sense. The math doesn't check out, unfortunately. The Jags, they want to reduce Travis Etienne's workload. That's not guessing. We know that they want to do that. What exactly are they reducing? There's a big problem with that. Travis Etienne exceeded 20 carries literally 3 times last season. He had a good solid total carries, 220 carries, good number, not egregious though. But as you guys know, I don't mind those running backs in the 10 to 15 carries range, but if you're going to have that level of production on the ground, you have to be a pass catching back with a high level of volume through the air. And, unfortunately, he just, although he has that capability, they're not utilizing him in that way. He had 45 targets last season. That was less than Samaje Perine, Devin Singletary, Michael Carter, Rex Burkhead. It was not good. He was not a good receiving back, unfortunately. And thinking that they're going to increase targets for him, it's not realistic. They're adding in Calvin Ridley. They've already got all of these fantastic pass catchers that they're returning. To think that somehow they're going to adjust the offense so that all of a sudden Travis Etienne is in an Austin Eckler type of role, it doesn't add up. The math isn't mathing. It's a problem. I can't get on board with Travis Etienne. It makes me highly uncomfortable.
This reminds me, because I remember watching, and Tara, obviously you watch a lot of Clemson football. Travis Etienne essentially had 85 catches, just over 1,000 yards those last 2 seasons at Clemson. He's got his quarterback that he played with there in Jacksonville as well. So why are we not seeing him catch the ball? It doesn't make any sense why we're not seeing it, because we know typically when you see a running back not get passes here, say Isaiah Pacheco, is because they weren't really getting them in college. A.J. Dillon. We know the guy. We can see A.J. Dillon catch the ball. He just didn't do it a whole lot in Boston College. So his senior season, he caught a few more passes there, probably to get him ready for the draft. But we're talking about a guy who had 43 and 37 catches respectively. Catches, not targets, catches respectively his last 2 seasons at Clemson there. Over 1,000 yards receiving, not getting that work in the passing game. So, Terry, is there any reason that he's not getting these passes?
No, I think it's literally just, it's not like we haven't, now granted, we would have to go back to Doug Peterson and other offenses for some kind of reference. And we don't have, previous history of, Travis Etienne in the NFL because of that, rookie year injury. So there's not a lot that we can, go based off of history here to understand what's happening. But unfortunately, I just think that's the way that they're just utilizing the offense. I don't think it's that we would see them get another back and then all of a sudden that back has a heavy usage. They have a lot of pass catching options and they just don't do a lot of dump offs to the running back. Maybe it's just by design, which is worrisome. When you're looking at Travis Etienne, you can have all the talent in the world and the capabilities, and we know he can operate that way. But if they're not going to utilize you that way, if that's not within the offensive scheme, you think of Philadelphia, and that's maybe why I have concerns about DeAndre Swift. If they just offensively don't dump the ball off and pass to receiving backs often, there's nothing you can do about that. You can have all the talent in the world. If they're not going to utilize you that way, it doesn't really matter.
I'm high on Etienne. I think they are going to use him in a passing game. I don't think they wanted to overload him 1 year after that injury he had his rookie season. So I think he was on like a pitch count almost. So I think this year, I think if he has a good camp, they will rely on him a lot more. I think you will see that Austin Eckler type of role. Maybe not as to the extent because they do have those pass catchers we're talking about, but he's going to have, like, it makes no sense for you to have an ETN and not use him the way you should use it. As a coach, you can't not like play to your one of your best players, like biggest assets.
Well, he didn't draft him. I think that's part of, the other is that they're working within the context of what they have. They didn't draft him to be that way. That was Urban Meyer's crazy vision of I'm drafting Travis Etienne because I couldn't get Kadarius Toney. Like unfortunately, I just feel for Travis.
You mentioned that Doug Peterson offense there. He has traditionally been a two tight end type a quarterback, a coach there, so to speak, right? He likes to run his two tight end sets there. If you go back to that 2018 season when he won the Super Bowl with the Philadelphia Eagles, his running backs were like Josh Adams, Wendell Smallwood, Corey Clement, Jay Ajayi. Wendell Smallwood actually I think Darren Sproles was on that team. Wendell Smallwood led the team in receptions with 28. So it's not like they were asking their backs to do a whole heck of a lot. So maybe we probably should have seen this coming rather than him unlocking the offense, which he has. Peterson has unlocked this offense. It has turned into a passing offense, except it doesn't have a running back that they trust to catch the ball. Now, speaking of catching the ball and pass catchers, this one hurts. Maybe I'm just trying to use some reverse psychology here heading into the season. Maybe I'm trying to dig down here a little bit, but I am getting serious Steve Smith Sr. vibes out of Davante Adams this season. And it's not like Steve Smith was a bad player, because Davante Adams certainly isn't. Steve Smith was a good player, even towards the end of his career there in Baltimore. So I'm not going to say that, but the fact of the matter is the numbers started to drop from Steve Smith, and I'll get into the reason why here in just a second. But looking at Adams here in 2023, ADP wide receiver 7 there suggests he is still considered a valuable asset. Even his numbers would suggest that I'm probably out of line here. Adams had a 32.3% target share, which was ninth in the league. He was ninth in the league in receptions with over 100, third in yards with 1,516. His 14 touchdowns led the league, and only Justin Jefferson had more than his 180 targets a season ago. But that's when we knew who the quarterback was going to be. We have no clue if it's going to be Jimmy Garoppolo, Aiden O'Connell, Brian Hoyer. Heck, it could be Carson Wentz that we talked about earlier on the show. I don't know who it's going to be. Now, Adams, he's still one of the top receivers in the game. You go around and ask any DB in the league who the top 5 receivers are in the NFL, and Davante Adams' name is going to come up in the conversation probably 98% of the time. Now, when I make that reference to Steve Smith, it's not because Steve Smith was lacking the talent. What Steve Smith was lacking was an elite quarterback. He was saddled with Joe Flacco in 2014 through 2016 on those Baltimore Ravens teams. And Father Time is ultimately undefeated. And Adams, he's going to be turning 31 in December. Last season, those target numbers that we just talked about, they were inflated from a benefited relationship there with Derek Carr, and also Hunter Renfrow and Darren Waller each missed significant time. In 2023, Renfrow is healthy for now, and while Waller is now no longer a Raider, he's making his work there going in New York. They went out there and they signed Jacoby Myers. They drafted Michael Mayer. So there's more competition for targets available. We know, even if it's Jimmy Garoppolo under center, first off, Jimmy Garoppolo, he's a tight end guy. That's Jimmy Garoppolo's style. He likes a good old tight end. He cannot push the ball down the field. That is what we're talking about. Now, Jimmy Garoppolo does know how to get the ball into his playmakers' hands. Christian McCaffrey, George Kittle, Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk. He just can't push the ball down the field. And that's where Davante Adams is at his best, when he's one-on-one on the outside, where he's a total matchup nightmare. I can't trust Jimmy Garoppolo. I can't trust this Raiders offense right now. I can't trust this whole setup. I don't know. If I don't know who the quarterback is, I can't trust the wide receivers. I know he put up numbers with Jared Stidham last season, but we're not talking about Jared Stidham. I wish they would have re-signed him, because if we're talking about Brian Hoyer, Aiden O'Connell, that's like worst case scenario. I don't know how you recover from that. I don't know. You have to be I don't even know if Calvin Johnson could produce with Aiden O'Connell or Brian Hoyer at this point in their careers, right? So when I look at this, Davante Adams, I'm not saying he's going to be a bust. I'm saying he's carrying one of the highest bust potentials in the entire NFL and in the entire fantasy football. He's a guy who's going at pick 12, pick 13, pick 14 there, either at the very end of the first round or the very start of the second round. You're going to have to invest a high draft pick on him, and you don't know what you're going to get. Sure, it could be a huge, if things roll right and he has a good season, you're going to look like a genius. But more often than not, you're going to look like a fool. And I can't trust it. There's so many other players that I feel better about. I'd rather have A.J. Brown right now that I can trust over a Davante Adams. And A.J. Brown, I can get him on the back end of the second round, so I know I can get him early in the second. Tara, try and talk me off the cliff here. Try and talk me down a little bit. Give me something. Give me some hope.
Okay, let me reel myself back in, because you talked about Steve Smith and bad quarterback. And you guys, so I'm from South Carolina. So all I could remember was those days of him in South Carolina with Jake Delhomme and what a disaster it was and how awful he was, despite, and Steve Smith and everything he had to overcome. God, that man had awful quarterbacks. Poor Steve Smith.
Bad luck of quarterbacks there. He never had an elite quarterback at any point in his career. And
it
paid me to watch him. It paid me to watch, you knew that he had much more to give. When we talk about players retiring maybe before their time, Steve Smith comes. I mean, Barry Sanders, Calvin Johnson, Gale Sayers, those guys' names always come up. Steve Smith, I think he still had a lot to give. Yeah, that 2015 season, he only played in 7 games. But 2016, he played 14 games. Had 799 yards, 103 targets. He only caught 70 passes out of those 103 targets. That's the Joe Flacco effect right there. Now, like I said, I still believe 2014 in Baltimore, Steve Smith still had 79 catches, 133 targets, 1,065 yards. Still putting up good numbers. That 2016 dip is what I'm talking about here. We're going to talk about Davante Adams, because I don't know what that quarterback situation is going to be.
So we don't know what the quarterback situation is going to be, although the Raiders don't seem panicked whatsoever, which is very interesting, because you would think for sure that the coaching staff there would really be invested in them having a positive turnaround for this season. They cannot afford another failure.
They're looking forward a year. I don't think they're worried about this season. Change for Caleb.
That's, I don't know if they can afford that. So I do think that Jimmy Garoppolo is going to be fine, because it's something that they were aware of. And I think, this is just kind of what Jimmy does. But regardless, it's Davante Adams. He hasn't physically, last year, obviously there was a little inconsistency with Carr because of Carr, nothing to do with Davante Adams. But anybody that, watched him, there was no visible decline in Davante Adams. We can't tag these guys with, not to say that you said this, Matt, but we can't tag, just in general, we can't tag these guys as they age with, age regression, when we visibly didn't. We didn't see injury issues. Right at the end of the season, we saw somebody that straight up just didn't want to be there, but I think they kind of already verbalized that. So I didn't see any fall off. I didn't see any injury fall off. I didn't see any production fall off. I didn't see anything visibly on the field in terms of his capabilities. Didn't lose a step or anything. We talk about a wide variety of players, like, DeAndre Hopkins on the free agent market and the rumors of him losing a step and whatnot and burst and everything. But we don't see that with Davante Adams. And he's, to me, is the kind of receiver that overcomes a questionable quarterback. I don't really feel like he's incredibly risky. I know it, it's difficult when when we're talking about if he was a guy that was being drafted as wide receiver 10, that would be another story. When you're drafting him as a potential, number 5, 6, 7 quarterback, things start to get a little bit shaky if he's a guy that you're drafting at the end of the first, beginning of the second. But still, at the same time, it's one of those situations where you're probably going to have to take your lumps, similar to last year, in terms of there just being some of those games every now and then where there's a low level of production because it's just a horrific game from the quarterback. But with Davante Adams in general, the overall production is probably going to be another top 5 season, because he's just still at that level of his game where he overcomes everything because he is that dude. So I'm not afraid, and I'm not, I drafted him in a redraft just the other day. I'm not afraid of Davante Adams. He's still a very fine wide receiver 1 option for me.
Well, Tara mentioned that we're not seeing any signs of old age. Now, I noticed the older I got, the more ornery I became, right? I started yelling at kids walking on my grass. I started yelling at clouds. I started pushing photographers. That's exactly where I was going. So we're starting to see Davante Adams in that whole aging process where he's like, camera guy, get out of here. He's shoving camera dudes. No,
the camera guy was in his face you can't be that close. Like, come on. I'm a photographer. I know better. Like, come on.
Well, he's just trying to get a shot. He got a shot, all right. We'll put it that way. He got a shot. We'll put it that way. Now, like I said, I don't want to be right on this one. I'm hoping this reverse psychology kind of works.
I'm surprised you went there.
I'm sorry. You know what? Davante Adams, a huge fan of the show. I'm sure he's going to take this and use it as bulletin board material there, kind of push himself 2 seasons. So if he has a good season, I'm going to take credit for it. So, in all honesty, like I said, it's the biggest bust potential out there because you are investing highly into him, right? Anytime you're looking at a guy in the first and second round, they're going to carry a higher bust risk. We talked about some of these other players here a little bit earlier. Isaiah Pacheco, yes, he could be one of those guys you do not want to draft, but he's being drafted a little bit later where you can kind of feel a little bit safer. The risk is already baked into that ADP. There's no risk baked into Davante Adams' ADP right now. There was no risk baked into Jonathan Taylor's ADP last season. He was going off the board as one of the first 3 selections. He ended up being a bust due to injuries or whatnot. We can't predict all that kind of stuff. But I'm just saying here, he has one of the biggest risks because you're investing quite a bit in him. Some other players here, I'm just going to quickly ramble them off that I have kind of on my risk watch list. Not saying that they're going to be guys. These are guys I'm kind of taking with a grain of salt here when I'm looking at my drafts. They include Josh Allen. I'm expecting him to do a little bit less rushing. Give me Patrick Mahomes. Give me Jalen Hurts. Maybe even Joe Burrow ahead of him as far as redraft is concerned. Tua Tagovailoa, that health is always going to be a risk. Right. Deshaun Watson. What if it wasn't rust? What if it wasn't rust when we're talking about Deshaun Watson?
Has to be rust.
You want to call it rust right now, but we don't know for sure. We haven't seen him do anything yet. And
I'm with you, man.
Hey, Geno Smith, he comes to mind here as well because he did it once. Okay, we've got many years saying that he couldn't do it. We got 1 year says that he could, and the coach that helped him whisper in his ear to get him to where he was, he's now in Tampa Bay working with Baker Mayfield. So we'll see that. Maybe the Seahawks decide to run the ball a little bit more. Speaking of the Seahawks running backs, Kenneth Walker is always going to be on that risk bust list for me just because of JSN, Tyler Lockett, DK Metcalf, Zach Charbonnet. I mean, there's so many different players there involved in this offense. It's going to be tough. Javonte Williams, I don't care what Sean Payton's saying about him right now. I don't trust that knee. I see him more as a J.K. Dobbins right now. Yeah. There's a reason why they went out there and signed Samaje Perine. There's a reason we've heard Dalvin Cook linked to the Broncos. I don't like that. Alexander Madison's a guy I'm not too fond on here. Everyone else is pushing his ADP up. I don't like when people push ADPs up. You're looking at 32 receptions on 39 targets. We know he can catch a ball to a degree, but he's got a somewhat limited ceiling here. And I just don't think that we're going to see him involved in this passing game because Dalvin Cook was basically pushed out of the passing game. We know that the Minnesota Vikings want to pass the ball more. DeAndre Swift, again, injury risk is main thing here when we look at this.
He's going to be
good. It is what it is. Hey, you are what you are until you're not that anymore. And until he stops being injured, he's going to be on that, right? Wide receiver, Keenan Allen. Hey, I love what Keenan Allen can do, but there's so many mouths there in Los Angeles to feed. As long as Justin Herbert's throwing that ball around, he's going to spread it around as well. Odell Beckham Jr. Stop it, people. Stop it. It's the name game here, the Odell Beckham Jr. Last time we saw him, he was catching touchdowns in the Super Bowl. That's fantastic. That was 2 ACL surgeries ago, for crying out loud. George Pickens, another one of those guys who's picking up momentum here heading into the draft season. I feel there's a Gabe Davis-esque type season coming out of George Pickens there. Kadarius Toney. Wow. What's better than one hamstring? 2 hamstrings, and Kadarius Toney doesn't have any of them. Courtland Sutton, again, he's the guy I have on my list. Until Sean Payton can come in there and fix Russell Wilson, I can't trust Russell Wilson's going to be able to fix Courtland Sutton. DJ Moore, hey, highest ADP on this team as far as the Bears are concerned. This is a run-first team. I can't see them transitioning to a full pass.
Fields is Dylan.
Hey, Fields is good. Has all the potential to be.
He's Dylan in camp. I'm hearing rumors
in the league. I have no doubt that Fields could be the top quarterback in the league altogether. But again, I need to see it to believe it right now as far as the passing game is concerned. Marquise Hollywood Brown.
Hey, no slander of College of the Canyons. I will
slander all College of the Canyons former players here, especially if Kyler Murray's not passing and they're relying on Colt McCoy or Clayton Tooney to give him the ball. And, of course, at tight end, this is a bit of a surprise here. George Kittle, because I look at the targets that he's seen the last 3 seasons, going back to 2020, 7.9. Great. 6.7 in 2021, 5.7 last season. Those target numbers are coming down. Christian McCaffrey, Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, they're on the up. Someone's got to come down. With that all being said, these are just some players to kind of keep an eye on. I'm not saying they're busts, but there's definitely guys I'm more hesitant to draft rather than some other guys.
They're bustable.
He's saying they're bust. No, just bookmark these.
Right.
And for the record, I never said Spiller was coming in to take Austin Eckler's job. I always said that Austin Eckler was really not a running back.
Go big.
I don't feel like Major was alone on that one.
Oh, no. Major was alone on the Spiller. He wasn't alone on his hatred towards Austin Eckler. We just had different views of why we didn't like Eckler. He didn't like Eckler because of Isaiah Spiller. I didn't like Eckler because he's not really a running back. There's a difference there.
Wait, now you're kind of I didn't say it like that. I said he was going to be a factor, and he was like the last factor. It wasn't like he's going to come and take his position. I'm just saying that he has some young guys behind him who's like kind of nipping at him. The music, he played me up.
Go back and fact check. Everybody go back and fact check.
Thanks, guys.
And while you're going back and fact checking, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button, and we will see you next week. See you later.